Hello everyone, I'm Matthew, and this is Learn the Lingo. If you've ever compared different English versions of the third verse of Psalm 100, you'll have noticed that there are two main kinds of translations that are quite different from each other. Some versions say something like, "Know that the Lord is God. He is the one who made us, and we are His." Other versions render this last sentence as, "He is the one who made us, and not we ourselves." Why such a different reading? Let's see what's going on here by taking a look at the Hebrew this is translated from. This last phrase is from the Hebrew words velo anachnu. This first word, velo, means and to him, or and of him, and anachnu means we. This is where we get the translation, and of him we are, or and we are his. So where does the translation, and not we ourselves, come from? Well, notice that before this phrase in the Hebrew, there is a word written differently from the rest. This word is also said as velo, but is spelled with an aleph instead of a vav, and so it does not mean and of him, but rather and not. If we read this phrase with this velo instead of the other, we get velo anachnu, and not we ourselves, a completely different reading from and we are his. In the Masoretic text of the Hebrew Bible, which is the manuscript used in most Hebrew Bibles, and from which most English versions are translated, there are 1,274 cases like this one in Psalm 100, where we are offered two different readings of the Hebrew text, called Qere and Ketiv. These two terms are Aramaic. Qere means read or read aloud, and Ketiv means written. In Psalm 103, the Ketiv, what is written, is the velo with aleph, which makes the verse read, and not we ourselves. Well, the Qere, what should be read, is velo with vav, which makes, and we are his. So, why does the Masoretic text offer these two readings, one that is written and one that should be read instead? The names Qere and Ketiv infer that the Ketiv was most likely what was written in the original manuscripts the Masoretic text was copied from, while the Qere, what the scribes thought should be read instead, are changes made to that text for certain reasons, such as correcting words that seem to have been misspelled somehow. Usually, English translations will translate the Qere, since it is what is supposed to be read, instead of the Ketiv, what is written. In this particular verse in Psalms, though, many versions do translate the Ketiv instead. Depending on the Hebrew Bible you have, the Qere and the Ketiv will be written in different ways and in different places. Originally, the Ketiv was kept inside the rest of the written text, while the Qere, correcting the Ketiv, was written in the margin. Nowadays, though, both the Qere and the Ketiv are usually put in the text, with the Ketiv, what is written, printed differently from all the other words. In my Hebrew Bible, for example, the Ketiv is printed in a smaller size and does not have any vowel pointings, since it is not meant to be read aloud. Today, we will look at the differences between some Qere and Ketiv readings, and some of the reasons these changes were likely made. One of the most common changes the Qere makes to the text is simply spelling corrections of the Ketiv that do not change the meaning of the word. For example, the Hebrew of 1 Kings 21:29 says, Lo avi hara'ah, which means, I will not bring the disaster. The verb avi, I will bring, is spelled without its root letter aleph in the Ketiv, so the Qere adds it to make the correct spelling. Again, these very common types of changes do not change the meaning of the text, but only make small emendations to make the text more readable. Another very common change is to change a vav to a yod, or vice versa. This happens a lot with names. 2 Samuel 3:15 mentions a man who in the Ketiv is called Lush, spelled with a vav. The Qere changes the vav in this name to a yod to make the name Laish. One of Esau's sons was named Yoush, but sometimes the Ketiv, the written text, shows this as Yaish, with a yod instead of a vav. In these places, that spelling is changed to Yoush, matching with the Bible's other mentions of this person. Sometimes the Qere may change the text to more closely reflect the Hebrew they used at the time the Qere was made, updating some ancient Hebrew grammar that was no longer in use. For example, the pronoun for you, speaking to a woman, is at, but in some places of the Bible, written with older Hebrew, it was ati. In 2 Kings 4:16, this ati pronoun that had fallen out of use is changed to the standard at by the Qere. Certain verbs whose subject is you speaking to a woman also have an archaic or ancient ending, t, and a more standard modern ending, t. Most of the verbs with this archaic form were changed to the modern form to be better understood, as in Ruth 3:3, where the verb vayaradti, and you shall go down, with the archaic ending t, is changed to vayaradet, with the modern ending t. One rather common situation where the difference between the Qere and the Ketiv can make a more significant change to the meaning of the text is when the Qere changes the form of a verb to make it have a different subject. Though this change usually only happens to make the form of the verb agree with the subject of the sentence. For example, Joshua 18:14 says the endings of a certain border were at a city called Kiryat Ye'arim. The verb for were in the Ketiv, what is written, is haya, which is singular, not plural like its subject endings. So the Qere makes a small correction, changing the verb to the plural hayu, which agrees with the plural subject. Joshua 5:1 says, with the Ketiv, that the Lord dried up the waters of the Jordan before the Israelites until we passed over. The Qere changes this we to they, just to match the rest of the text, which is written with a third-person narration. Either way you read it, both readings have the subject as the Israelites. One place that changes the actual meaning of the text is 2 Samuel 12:24, which says that David and Bathsheba had a son, and then the Ketiv, what is written, says he called his name Solomon. The Qere changes the verb to make it mean she called his name Solomon. Sometimes the Qere will change a preposition in the Hebrew text. Often the two different prepositions have about the same meaning and are even translated the exact same way into English. Some prepositions have very different meanings though. In Joshua 3:16, when the waters of the Jordan stopped flowing, the Ketiv text says the water was piling up very far away at Adam, which is a town. The Qere changes the preposition at to me, which means from. The water was piling up very far away from Adam. In 2 Kings 23:33, a pharaoh captured a king of Judah. The Ketiv says this happened bimloch birushalayim, which means, well, he reigned in Jerusalem. Well being the Hebrew preposition ba. The Qere changes this preposition to mi, from, mimloch birushalayim, from reigning in Jerusalem, which is the Hebrew expression for so that he could not reign in Jerusalem. All these types of situations account for the vast majority of differences between the Qere and Ketiv, mostly small changes in spelling and some changes in subject or preposition, usually for grammatical purposes. Sometimes, though, the difference will change the meaning of a noun or verb. Many of these changes are made where the Ketiv is completely unintelligible, and the Qere provides a clear reading. In a few cases, though, both the Ketiv and the Qere can be understood, and we'll look at some of those cases now. In 2 Kings 24, we have the phrase, before Isaiah had left the middle city. The word ir, city, is the Ketiv reading. This was changed to chatzer, court, to make the Qere reading, before Isaiah had left the middle court. This particular Ketiv and Qere completely changes the spelling of the Hebrew word. This type of change is very rare. Most of the time, the Qere will only change one or two letters of the Hebrew word, though those small changes can make the word mean something completely different. 2 Samuel 23:13 talks about 3 of David's 30 mighty men. The 3 is the Qere of this verse, what you are supposed to read, but its written Ketiv says 30. 30 of the 30 doesn't make as much sense, and also does not agree with the First Chronicles account of this same story. So what was written was corrected by the Qere to say 3 instead of 30. 1 Kings 12:33 says that King Jeroboam instituted a festival in a month that he alone devised. This alone in Hebrew is the Ketiv milvad. The Qere changes the last letter dalet to a vav to make the word milibo, which means from his own heart. He instituted a festival in a month he devised from his own heart. Jeremiah 17:8, with the Ketiv, says, He will be like a tree planted by water, that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes. The word fear is yira, which the Qere changes to yir'e, which can be translated as notice. It does not notice when heat comes. Without vowel pointings, the only difference between yira and yir'e is the he added to the end. 2 Kings 16:6 says that people came to live in a city called Eilat. The text has two different readings of who these people were. The Ketiv says Aramim, which would mean Arameans or Syrians. The Qere changes Aramim to Adumim, which means Edomites. Without vowels, Aramim and Adumim look very similar, especially because the letters that are different, Resh and Dalet, can be easily confused if the writing was not done clearly. Several changes the Qere makes just replace one letter with another letter which looks similar. Since the two letters can be easily confused, the scribes likely thought the Ketiv may have been a previous scribal error, and so gave an alternative reading in the Qere with the other similar-looking letter. The verb in Psalm 77:12 is in the Ketiv azkir, which means I will recall. The Qere changes the yod to a vav to make eskor, I will remember. Just like resh and dalet, the letters yod and vav can be easily confused if the scribe who wrote the scroll wrote a vav too short or a yod too long. The Hebrew of Proverbs 21:29 says, with the Ketiv, Vayashad hu yachin darachav, which means, but the upright establishes his ways. The Qere changes the word yachin, establishes, to yavin, which means gives thought to, and also changes the plural darachav, his ways, to the singular darko, his way. Vayashad hu yavin darko, but the upright gives thought to his way. Here again, in yachin and yavin, we have two different readings with similar-looking letters, kaf and beit, which can be confused since they are only differentiated by a little overhang in the bottom corner of the beit. One interesting use the Qere sometimes has is replacing vulgar language in the Bible. In 2 Kings 18:27, a commander of the Assyrians comes to threaten the people of Jerusalem. He says that he was sent to give these threats to the people on the wall, who would have to eat their own dung and drink their own urine. The original Hebrew words here for dung and urine were, at least at the time the Qere was invented, considered too vulgar for reading aloud in scripture. So the Qere offers less vulgar alternate readings for these words. In 1 Samuel 5, the Philistines were struck with a disease after stealing the Ark of the Covenant. The original Hebrew word for this disease is generally understood to mean hemorrhoids, to which the scribes later gave an alternative Qere reading with a less vulgar word understood to mean simply abscesses. Let's now circle back to the example we had at the beginning, where the word lo was spelled with an aleph indicative, meaning not, and a vav in the Qere, meaning to or of him. This specific difference between the Qere and Ketiv happens over a dozen times in the Bible, and sometimes both readings are easily understood, though they differ significantly in meaning. Job 13:15 says, with the Ketiv, he will surely slay me, I will not hope. The Qere changes this lo, meaning not, to the lo that means to him, or in this case, in him. Even if he slays me, in him I will hope. In 2 Kings 8, a king sends a servant to the prophet Elisha, who tells the servant, Emor lo chayo dichye. If this lo means to him, as it does in the Qere, this Hebrew means, say to him, you shall surely live. But if it means not, as it does in the Ketiv, it means, say, you shall surely not live. Elisha then tells the servant that the king will in fact die, but the servant tells the king Elisha said, Chayo dichye, you shall surely live. Proverbs 26:2 says, like a fluttering bird, like a darting swallow, so an undeserved curse does not come. The does not come, meaning the curse will not happen, is lo tavo. The lo, spelled with aleph. This is the Ketiv reading. The Qere changes this to lo with a vav, to him. The undeserved curse will come to him being the person giving the curse without justification. With most Qere and Ketiv readings, we are given both a Ketiv, what is written, and a Qere, what should be read. In a few places, though, we only get one. This happens when the scribes added a Qere reading with no Ketiv counterpart, or removed a word in the Ketiv without providing a Qere alternative. Jeremiah 31:38 says, "Behold, days, declares the Lord." This is a rather strange expression for the Bible, which usually says, "Behold, days are coming." So the scribes provided this word, "are coming," in a Qere reading that has no Ketiv counterpart. 2 Kings 5:18 says in the Ketiv, "May the Lord please forgive." The word for please, na, is written as a Ketiv reading, which means that you are not supposed to read it aloud. Before we end today, there is one more aspect of the Qere that is important to know. There are a few very common words that are written with certain vowel pointings that indicate that they are not supposed to be sounded out with their consonant letters. For example, the word for she in Hebrew is he, with the e vowel spelled with a yod. However, in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, this pronoun is spelled with a vav. On these unusually spelled pronouns, the scribes added a vowel pointing called a hirik, which makes its e sound with a yod, not a vav. This is their way of saying that you are not supposed to read the word with the vav sound, but with the yod sound, he. This type of Qere, made by adding certain vowel pointings instead of changing the consonant letters, called the Qere perpetuum, happens with a couple other very common words in the Bible. The words have to be common enough so everyone can know how they should be pronounced without having the correct spelling. The Hebrew name for Jerusalem is Yerushalayim. That ayim ending is supposed to be spelled with a yod, which makes the y sound between the two vowels a and e. However, in the Hebrew Bible, Yerushalayim is spelled without this yod, and here the scribes added in both the a and e vowels under this letter lamed to imply you should say those two vowels with a consonant y sound in between, even though the yod that makes that sound is not written. The 4-letter name of God, Yod He Vav He, is traditionally not pronounced, so when you read it, you're supposed to say Adonai instead, which means my Lord or my Master. To indicate that you are supposed to read the name as Adonai, the scribes would write the vowels of the word Adonai onto the 4-letter name, with one exception. If this name is written right next to the actual word Adonai, you are supposed to instead read the name as Elohim, which means God. In these cases, the vowel pointings on the name will be those of the word Elohim, showing you are supposed to pronounce the name here as Elohim. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. If you want to learn more about the Hebrew Bible, check out this video or this playlist. If you're interested in learning how to read and write Hebrew, check out this playlist here, or this one if you want to learn Hebrew grammar. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.